Self-love. Self-love, love. I won't sing because you'll probably leave the channel, or episode at least anyway. So, self-love. Is it important? Pretty much, yes. And as a 29-year-old man, guys sometimes don't talk about self-love and think it's all sappy, but it's really, really important if you want to achieve many things in life, because you've got to have that trust and love in yourself. And that's what the focus is today. So my experience with this is I've had times when I've really hated and disliked myself, quite frankly. And there's times, more recent times, yay, where weirdly during this lockdown period, I've grown more and more respect for myself because I've had more time to reflect and work on myself. But I've had other times in my life when I've been really on top of myself and being really happy about myself. And really it's habits that I've noticed. Habits, if you don't know me already, I'm a massive one on habits. But when I've not liked myself, in fact, I'd say it's self-hate at some point, and just sharing this, but I got to a point once at university where I actually really hated myself that much that I started to harm myself a bit. It didn't get too serious. It was alcohol was involved, and that I'll go into that in a minute in the habits, but I sort of started to cut my arms a little bit because I really hated myself, and I don't know what the thought process was behind it, but obviously it can get quite serious and more severe in some cases. But obviously did that twice in my early 20s. Very, very stupid thing to do to myself, but that was a level of self-hate at some point. And then I had it come and go sometimes in my 20s before I got to a point where I went, the question pops in my head, I'm me for the rest of my life. It's probably quite a good thing to start liking me and appreciating me. Even though I'd appear confident in some situations, I'd have this very low self-esteem. But now I'm just constantly obsessed with building it up. And I feel great sometimes just giving myself that time and that respect. And I'm so proud of what I've achieved sometimes. And people might watch this and think, oh, that's a bit sappy. But I feel like everyone needs to be that. And if everyone had more self-love and self-esteem, there would be a lot less violence in the world. There would be a lot less, because, for example, when someone attacks another person, that's because they don't like something inside of themselves. So they're throwing that insecurity. So if they had that self-love and was looking after themselves, they wouldn't project it onto another person. So anyway, going back to my story, when I've really not liked myself, it's because I wasn't looking after myself. It's stuff when I was boozing too much. I mean, university life at the time. And then through my 20s though, I was going out and drinking a lot, as I mentioned before. I was doing stuff like not eating very well. I was spending too much time on social media and just generally not doing too many things that made me feel good. I exercise now. I still exercise, but just quite a lot of bad habits, especially the sort of boozing. And that's when I didn't like myself. But when I've had habits like meditation, like reading, like exercising, like eating right, and not drinking as much, I've really started to respect myself. And I can now and then have a blip. Like, I think a few months back, I went too nuts, and then I had a real downfall again and had an accident from drinking too much. So shows we're all human. But I could see then I was able to come back quickly and said, Johnny, you're only not liking yourself because you're not treating yourself right. And I started treating myself right again and started feeling good. And that's through my habits. So self-love can take a bit of work, but if you're doing habits that are consistently looking after yourself and respecting yourself, that's going to help you. And one way I like to look at it is there's an inner child within you. And this came from a spiritual psychology workshop I was on recently. And imagine the 3-year-old version of you and how you're treating them and looking after them. If you're going to say horrible things to yourself all the time and throw a load of rubbish into them, that child is going to become a bit crazy. But if you're loving yourself and respect, that child's going to be happy. He's going to be happy and free. And also, that's also why it's important to add joy into your life and do the things that you find fun, because that child's going to be happy. So really think about the habits you're doing day to day. So I'm going to go into the habits now and what's really helped me. In terms of the habits, first of all, it's really important that you apply self-discipline. And when we say self-discipline, discipline sometimes a word we associate with negativity, but doing things and keeping a structure around your life can be an act of self-love, because you're giving yourself that exercise, giving yourself that healthy foods, and giving yourself that meditation, all the things that make you feel good. And it's going to be different for different people, but generally exercising and eating well make most people feel good. And yeah, doing things you like. But putting that structure in place is going to help you. Now, don't put too much structure, because I've done that, and then it just gets a bit crazy and you get a bit overwhelmed. But putting enough structure in place to be able to discipline yourself to do the things that are good for you out of self-love, rather than out of whipping yourself to do something, if you think of it like that. So the first tip I've got for you is journaling. You can't love someone unless you know them. So you wouldn't start falling in love with someone else unless you knew them. So you can't really fall in love with yourself if you don't really know who you are or what you need. And quite a lot of our lives, we're on autopilot mode. We're very, very busy, especially in a Western culture. So making that time to journal and work through and understand who you are, rather than just going on autopilot and not making time for yourself, is really important. Because when you can understand who you are and what you really need, what are your true needs and values, you're going to have a good starting point to be able to apply the right habits into your life. Tip number 2 is keeping a notepad or something with you throughout your day, or even use your phone. And it's better to write down, because neuroscience shows that more neural pathways are formed when we write something down, pen to paper or pencil to paper, than phone. But sometimes it's just easier just write in your phone. But keeping a note of how you feel, your change of mood throughout the day, is a really, really good one, because there are certain things that can trigger us. So sometimes I'll see something on social media and make me feel in a bad mood. That's why I try and avoid it at certain hours. Or I'll notice that if I've had maybe a little bit too much sugar, such as a sugary cereal, after I finish my fasting and had my nuts and good bit of exercise, or avocado, classic, then I'll start to have this crash, and my mood will go down, my energy will go down. So I started writing that down and tried to reduce it as much as possible. So just keeping a note, and then do the opposite. What makes you feel good? So when you feel, yes, I'm good, I'm happy this morning, what has triggered that off? Sometimes it might not be anything, because what I find, sometimes I'm in such a good mood because I've been doing all these habits continuously, which don't always make immediate difference, but suddenly they start going into my subconscious, and I'm like, yeah, I like life, I'm happy. I don't know why I'm happy, but I'm so happy today. But sometimes there are certain things that trigger you off to be happy or negative. So start making a note of that, because when you consciously do that, and don't just mentally note it, physically note it, whether that's on your phone or on your notepad, just keep doing that, because then that's going to create more awareness to help you understand what things to cut out a bit more, and then what things to add a little bit more of in. And then my final point is what I was saying a little bit about self-discipline, but it's establishing some routines in your life, some routines of things that are going to make you feel good. So adding the things that make you feel good into your day. Adding what makes you light up, what makes you happy. In the morning, for some people, they could do an hour's meditation and feel good. For me, an hour's meditation doesn't do much. So I'll do 10 minutes and I feel okay. And then I'll go do some reading, and then I'll do some affirmations, and that sort of makes me feel good. Some people like to exercise in the morning. For me, it's midday or early afternoon, depending how I'm getting on with my work. And that gives me a buzz. But really start to notice what actually is making you feel good, and then how you can put it into your routine. Start writing down your routines. What are you going to do in the morning? What's a little routine you could do at lunchtime? What are you going to do before you go to bed to make you feel as good as possible? Yes, it might take you a bit of work, but yes, things take work in life, but it's probably worth putting the work in to make you feel good. Overall, self-love is something we can get from ourselves, and it shouldn't be looked externally. But it requires a little bit of structure, requires a little bit of discipline. on ourselves. It requires quite a bit of self-awareness to understand what we need in order to feel good and cut out the things that make us feel bad. So think about some of the things I've said and go away and try those. And I'll catch you in the next video.